So let's talk about the experience I had owning the i8 and how I did on Turos. Again, if you guys watched the Airbnb video, I talked about how I did my analysis before purchasing the car. I didn't just get into the car and then get into Turo. I actually did my research and took a look at the other i8s that were getting listed out in Tampa. So I think there were roughly 2 or 3. There was one that was just crushing it. So I did my math with it. I noticed that he was renting it for $250 a day, and by the reviews you can tell how often they were renting it. And I saw that they were renting it for 10 days a month. But the things like you can't tell if it's rented out for 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. But again, I did a worst case scenario. So say they were all 1-day renters, and for $250 a night times 10, you're looking at 2.5K a month. There obviously are costs associated with listing your car in Turo. They took about 30% off. So I said, okay, worst case scenario is 1.5K a month. So I looked at the car, I think I put down like 10K. So it brought the payment down to 1,000. Insurance was roughly 300 bucks. So I was roughly paying 1.3K a month. Okay, so if the car was 1.3K and I could roughly make 1.5K, it was just worth it to me because I knew I wanted to enjoy the car anyways. It would help build my brand and I didn't have to pay owning the car. So I ended up actually driving to Orlando with my cousin. I never sat in an i8 before, never owned one obviously. So I said, okay, we're going and I'm purchasing this car. I didn't even think about the fact that if I would get approved or not. So we drove to Orlando, I saw it, I loved it. It was literally chrome and it just stood out like crazy. And I even noticed that it was owned by a popular YouTuber back in the day. So I sat in it, test drove it, loved it, and I was like, all right, let's get approved. And luckily I got approved. For some reason, still working as a nurse, that was the only income I had. They approved me. So I think having a W-2 definitely gets you approved a lot easier, obviously, versus just being like a business owner. And they let me drive off the lot with the cars. I remember driving it, it was like an amazing experience because obviously it's like first car that like I ever had that was just like a showstopper. Like it's crazy that, you know, coming from Bosnia, I was able to own this car. Like the doors went up and it's like things you only dream about. I was driving it back from Orlando. It was rush hour. It literally took like 2 hours to get back to Tampa. And I went on a cruise. I noticed like everyone just staring at it. Like I literally had like a Lambo and a McLaren, but for some reason the i8 had just like a huge hype about it. And I think it's just because of the gold like chrome wrap. I see i8s right now and like they're not that big of head turners, but that one just like stood out. And like I think that's why I did super well on Turo as well, because literally I listed it the first day and I had it booking literally the first day. I remember I listed it for $250. Again, my strategy is always like be at the same price point as your competition, provide higher value, and there's no way you're gonna not take the market share. So I listed it for $250, it got booked. I listed it for $275, it was still getting booked. I listed it for $300, it was still getting booked. I think the highest I went up to was like $350, and that car was always booked out. Like, yeah, I got to enjoy like on the weekends because like I would block it off. It was always getting rented out for music videos, graduation, birthdays, weddings, and so forth. Luckily, not all of these were on the weekends. Like a lot of the music videos and so forth were shot on like a Tuesday or Wednesday. So I had the car for pretty much every weekend that I wanted it. And that car was roughly generating about 4K, 5K a month. So I was literally profiting about 3K on the car, 3.5K. And I was driving a amazing car. And overall, I say I rented it for 3K profit every month. For the year I generated what, 36K? And I still sold it for almost the value that I bought it at. So I bought it for 60K, I sold it for 55K. But the experience itself was amazing. Like I met so many people, everyone that wanted to like shoot the car like for the music videos and so forth were super cool. A lot of them were like my clients afterwards. I met a lot of like business owners that converted into like marketing clients, and I still have like long-term friends that I met through that car. So between the tour experience and the Airbnb experience, I did make more money overall with Airbnb, but tour was definitely a lot more fun because you can't drive your townhouse around, right? You can't really show it off, but with the car, you just meet like super cool people, and like it's at a price point where not everyone can afford it. So like all your clientele is definitely like up there. Everyone's like doing something super cool. So as I mentioned, I'm rented it out for a year. The reason I sold it is because every car has this tipping point. Like there's a point where like the mileage gets to a level where it starts depreciating like a lot faster, and then you have issues. Like BMW is definitely not known for being a quality car, and like I didn't have like extended warranty on it or anything. In a year, like I had to do like tire replacements, oil changes, and so forth. Everything was running smooth until something with the transmission went wrong, and I think I had to pay like around like 6K, and there were like axle issues and everything else. Obviously, you have to understand with Turo, like people don't take care of the car like that. So there are going to be like wear and tear and damages to the car. As long as you make enough money to cover the damages, it makes sense. But then there's so many things wrong with the car at a certain point that's not worth like repairing it. It came to a point where it just wasn't worth repairing. I sold it, and then I ended up buying a Porsche as well. Luckily with the i8, I didn't have any issues. Like there weren't any car accidents. There were like scratches and dings like on the wrap, but people like pretty much just paid that like out of pocket. Turo does not cover anything. Well, honestly, Turo like is horrible customer service. They try to not cover anything. They're literally like an insurance company. So they didn't cover the wrap damages because it was a added on feature. Like it's not something that came with the car originally. So they never want to cover any of those damages. So I always had to go back and forth with the clients and just get them to pay me to like repair like a wrap or buff out like a scratch and so forth. So I understood the fact that like, hey, if something does like happen with it, it probably won't get covered. But that's why I ended up buying a Porsche that was still under warranty. So I said, okay, if something does go wrong, at least Porsche will cover it. I had a 718, honestly loved it. It was an amazing car. And I had it on Turo for about 4 months. And I think it was just bad luck on Turo. That car was also around $1,000 a month in expenses, and it wasn't doing as well as the i8, but I think I was profiting about like $1,000 and so forth. But honestly, I just loved the car because it was convertible and it was super nice to drive. I just didn't want to pay for the extra payments. But literally 3 months into renting it, someone put in gas into the oil tank somehow, because we all know that Porsche like gas tank is on the front side, it's not like in the back. And they ended up actually opening up the trunk and swinging a knob, and they're like, okay, this is where the gas goes. Luckily, he wasn't able to turn it on, because if he did, it would have just gone through the whole transmission, and I would have to like repair the whole thing. Somehow the car like noticed that there was gas in the oil, and it didn't let him turn it on, but he was attempting to turn it on, and then the alternator went out as well. But ended up sending it into Porsche. They were able to just clean out the engine, so they just did like 6 oil changes just to clean out like any gasoline that was still like in the engine. They changed the alternator, which was covered by Turo, and I got lucky with that one. I only had to pay the deposit fee, and I think it was roughly like $1,000 through Turo, because just like regular insurance, you know, you have like a deposit, you have to pay that until they cover like the rest of the damages. But then literally like 2 months after that, a girl rents it and she totals the whole car. Luckily, again, it was fully covered by Turo. I think the car, I purchased it roughly for 60K, and then it was appraised for 65K, so I actually made some extra money off of that. Overall, Turo was a great experience. Again, there are headaches associated with it. I was making money off of it. I did meet a lot of amazing people, but then when you get to a certain class in car value, like the Lambo and the McLaren, it does not make sense renting those out, because they depreciate so fast that if you plan on racking up the miles, you're gonna end up losing more than you're making. And the repairs are like a lot more expensive on those, and people like truly do not take care of those cars. Everyone's drifting in them, they're racing in them and so forth. So I don't recommend touring those super exotic cars. I think the average like price point to like tour cars out is between like 15 to like 50K, and make sure you have like extended warranty on it, because if Turo doesn't want to cover it, you should at least have the factory warranty that covers the mechanical damages to the car. Some other things that happened with Turo that weren't direct experiences with me, but they were associated to my friends. I had a friend's Range Rover get stolen, so they rented out the car on Turo. They unplugged the GPS so that no one could find the car. They literally drove off, and the lady ended up selling it to someone else, and she said that someone stole it, so she wasn't responsible for it. They never got the car back. Luckily, they did pay off the car. I don't think he got the full payout on that one, because I think he bought the car super expensive, and then the value wasn't there as well. So I think they used Gap to supplement the difference. And then I had another friend that had his i8 stolen. No one knows truly who stole it, but the Lambo and the i8 were parked next to each other, and they ended up taking the i8. If you ask me, I would have probably taken the Lambo. So we think it was someone that rented the car before, programmed the key, because literally there's footage of the person walking in, and then literally 2 minutes later they're driving out of the parking lot with the i8. So they probably rented it, reprogrammed a key, walked in, took the car, and they never found it again. So understand with Turo, there's a lot more insurance involved. The insurance is hard to deal with because many times they don't like people renting out their cars. Even with banks, understand that when you do purchase a car on a loan and you're renting it out, you're not allowed to do that. Banks don't approve of you renting out the car while you're paying them off, nor does the regular insurance company. So your personal insurance, like say you have Progressive, if they find out that you're renting out your cars, they're gonna cut your insurance. So you do get insurance through Turo, but if they find out, they're gonna cut your personal insurance too. So there's a lot more like legal things involved, and then if there is like a damage, sometimes Turo does not want to cover like the full damage costs, like the medical side of it. And Turo is not reliable for any legal issues. So if someone does have a car accident, they get injured within your vehicle, they don't sue Turo, they sue you directly for any extra damages or medical issues and so forth.